I'm so excited for today's guest. Leslie Flores is the coordinator for education and cultural programs with the Oakland Athletics, where she has been making an impact for nearly a year. A proud graduate of Arizona State University, she earned her bachelor's degree in business entrepreneurship with a minor in nonprofits in 2023. During her time at ASU, she dedicated herself to education through a variety of volunteer roles, including tutoring, mentoring, and teaching English at a men's prison. In her current role, she focuses on helping players acclimate to life in the US, serving as a liaison for international players and supporting their life skills and educational needs. As a first-generation Mexican American and the youngest of five, Leslie's passion for community service and education stems from her upbringing in Arizona, and her commitment to helping others and fostering cultural equal integration is at the heart of her work with the Oakland Athletics. Take a listen. I'm so excited to have you on, and I think that everyone listening is gonna have such a great understanding of what your role is and what you do, because we don't talk enough about the life skills and educational needs, oftentimes of players
Right.
in any type of sport. So I'm excited, and I want to start with the groundwork here. So can you talk a bit about your journey in sports? Like, what does that look like? Where have you been? And what sort of led you to your current role at the A's?
Yes, for sure. So I mean, I definitely agree with what you touched on. I think even myself, before I stepped into this role, I didn't even know that a role like this existed. But it is so cool to now, be surrounded by a lot of other educators for most teams. I believe every MLB team has an educator in some form. A few of them have departments, different things, but for myself, like I said, I wasn't even aware that this role existed. But for me, I think really education has just been at the forefront of everything that I've done. I think especially in high school when I started to be more involved in my community. And I was born and raised here in Mesa, Arizona. And Mesa is predominantly a Latin community. So when I was growing up, I was obviously fortunate enough, being the youngest of five, that I learned English at the same time that I learned Spanish. So I was pretty set throughout school, but in high school was where I really kind of saw that gap between the language barriers. And for me, obviously, speaking both English and Spanish, I could translate for my peers, I could do tons of things, I could translate for my parents, and it just made me realize that there was a need out there for not just English language classes, but just education, and we don't all come from the same background. So that really, motivated me when I started at Arizona State University. It motivated me to continue to be out in my community and to help in any way that I could. So one of the first jobs that I had was actually tutoring and mentoring at a high school in Tempe. So it was Tempe High School, and they are obviously most of the kids there are low income, at-risk youth. So when I started working with them, I think it really just opened my eyes to, again, the world of education and really the impact that we can have on people's everyday lives. So originally, when I started at ASU, I started off not too sure about my major, and then I went with business entrepreneurship just because I felt like in the end, if I wanted to maybe start my own nonprofit or do something, I could have that business background. But I kind of got introduced to the world of sports a little bit. When I was at ASU, I wasn't a sports player myself, but I did, have a couple of friends that were in sports teams, and they talked a lot about, their international like teammates who were there. And so I thought that was really cool, but it never, I guess, occurred to me that there was a need for education or for life skills or for those things for them. So then ultimately, I graduated from ASU in 2023, and I was inevitably, like everybody else, on the job hunt. And so I was originally looking for a position as a coordinator with a nonprofit. I was really open to anything. And then being a Mesa native, I saw that the Oakland A's had posted something and that they were looking for an education coordinator in Mesa, Arizona. And so at first, since I have never played softball or baseball, and I obviously am a D-backs fan, being from Arizona. But I didn't have the typical sports background or the sports degree that I assumed, that most of my teammates or most of the people applying would have. So I just looked at the requirements and I was honestly really shocked to see that most of the things that they were looking for were things that I had already previously done in high school and at ASU. So I was like, you know what? I am going to take that leap of faith. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to be honest. I obviously am not going to maybe have the sports certification that they're looking for, but we're going to do it. We're going to try. So yeah, I ended up applying. I think I went through 6 rounds of interviews. Yeah, and ultimately they offered me the position, and it was definitely a journey to get here, but I am so grateful for that and taking that leap of faith and just going for it. And I have now learned so much and have also been able to, help our players in a bunch of different capacities. So it's been a journey, but definitely one that I'm super grateful for.
Wow. And so there's so many things that are coming through my mind, but I think the one that first pops up is that, a lot of people, and oftentimes a lot of women, we don't apply for certain jobs because we don't think we're qualified enough, when really we are.
Yes, 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 100%.
So is that sort of when you saw that job and it came up, there's moments of hesitation, or were you like, you know what, this looks cool. I'm from here. All of the things align. Like, and can you think back to that moment? Like, what went through your mind?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you are 100% right with that because even though I think I've obviously built my confidence up throughout the years, when I originally saw it, I can't lie that I definitely was like, you know what? I don't know if I should apply for this job because I was just so fearful that I was like, you know what? I'm putting myself out there, and what if they don't like want me, and what if that affects, my perception of myself? But then I had to really walk myself through it. And I think again, reading the job requirements and what I would be doing at a day to day, I was like, you know what? As a first generation American myself, I knew because I think one of the specific ones that really stuck out to me to where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it and we're gonna see how it goes. Was helping acclimate the players to the US. So to me, I was like, you know what? My parents are both immigrants. I unintentionally, I guess, sort of help them acclimate my entire life. And then throughout high school, translating for my peers who and their parents who maybe didn't have that language understanding, and then really just helping people understand life in the US. So I gave it a shot and I was like, you know what, the worst that can happen is they say no, and then that's just gonna redirect me to somewhere else and we are going to be great and we're going to be fine, and ultimately it ended up working out, and it showed me that same thing that you kind of just mentioned, that as women oftentimes we aren't sure, or we don't think that we're qualified for certain things, but we absolutely are. Sometimes we're actually overqualified for a lot of things, but but taking that leap of faith can really change your life. And I definitely think that hopefully anyone listening to this, if they were thinking about applying to a job or thinking about asking for something or doing something, this is a sign. This is a sign.
And you're proof of that. Absolutely. And the worst thing that they can do is say no.
Yeah,
And in your case, I mean, look at where you are and in your current role. What I'd
right.
love to hear too is when somebody says, coordinator of education and cultural programs, like what are your main responsibilities? What is every day I'm sure is a little bit different, but
Right.
what are some of the things that you do in this role?
Yeah, so I know that I've touched quite a bit on obviously that acclimation to the US, but to kind of give a little bit of background on that, So I've been in this position. This is my first season with the team. I started in September of last year, so next year will be my 1 year. But most of my role is that I obviously am a coordinator of education and cultural programs for all players. But obviously I am the more so like the liaison for the Latin American players who need a little more of that help and adjustment. So my some of my primary roles include we have for example, or maybe for those people listening that maybe want to understand a little of how baseball works and kind of like the feeding system that we work under. So we have an academy in the Dominican Republic that essentially any player signed internationally, they don't have to be Dominican, but if they're, Cuban or if they're Brazilian or they're really any international player, their first stop will be they'll be signed and then they'll be sent to our academy in the DR. So most of the players that we have there are really young. They're around, a lot of them can be signed when they're like 15, 16. So they'll be there in their super formative years. And then once they turn 18, they have the possibility to level up and come here to Arizona at our rookie level. And so I am essentially their first contact here in the US when those players come here internationally. So we're talking usually 18 or 19-year-olds that get here. And we obviously have to do the basics. We have to get them a social security number. We have to take them to the bank, help them open their first bank account. I walk them through what is life in the US. And so I'll kind of give them a presentation of culturally, maybe these are some of the differences. I think even before I stepped into this role, I've lived in Arizona my whole life. I underestimated really the huge cultural differences that you see between Latin America and the United States. So talking to them a little bit about how, and not in a bad way at all, but Latin America, I think they are really into music and being very extroverted and just they're kind of all over the place, but in a beautiful way. And then here in the United States, we're a bit more reserved, that a lot of things like that. So I think those are big changes. The food is a big change too. So we talk a lot about that. I always try to make sure that they have everything that they need and that they know that ultimately, any international player that we have, I'm a liaison for them. So if let's say they need any translating with like a coach or staff, or let's say any player just comes to me and says, you know what, I would like help working on, public speaking and being able to talk in front of my teammates or to ask questions, to do things like that. So we'll do a number of things. I also help coordinate community service here for all players. So that's really been a big push for me since I started this role. I wanted to make sure that the players were also getting that professional development off the field because I think that especially stepping into this role, I underestimated. They obviously have a lot of development on the field and we have amazing coaches and staff, but off the field, how can we make them better players? And that's really, really my focus in my role. So we've done a number of things. We've gone to a couple elementary schools and high schools and had players go and share their stories. We also have a really amazing nonprofit here that's maybe 5 or 6 minutes away from our complex. It is a nonprofit called Paz de Cristo, and they do a lot of different things, but one of the things that we've helped with is 365 days of the year, they have a hot meal for people who just need a meal, who are homeless, at risk, their families, anything, a hot meal, 6 p.m. So we've gone and we've helped prep and also pass out that food. So it's a lot of different things that I've gotten to do with them and I think they've also so working on their professional development off the field, but I also have grown a lot in this role and learned a lot from them and I've really had to work on that patience and empathy and really just continuing to find new ways and be creative to do new things with them. And it really, yeah, is a multitude of things, but I would say those are probably the main ones that come to mind.
I don't want people to ever underestimate the power of this role and the impact that you have on the players because coming to, we often talk about when you're in college and you go to a new team, that's a huge role in transition.
Right.
But coming to a completely different country,
Yes, for sure.
they need someone like you to advocate for them, but to also know that you're that resource, you're going to be there to support them, and you know that you're going to be the one that's, gonna help them through with whatever they'll need.
Yes, yes, 100%. And I think a big thing too is I mean obviously because I was talking about how young these players are when they get here. Another big thing that I noticed is obviously a lot of them are signed when they're around 15, 16, and most of the time they're signed before they graduate high school. So they usually go to like a baseball academy in their respective countries, and that's their focus. And so when they get signed, it's like, you know what, I made it. I achieved my dream, and that's what I'm going to focus on 100%. But I think, especially in this role, my shift has also been let's focus on the educational side. And that can definitely come with some interesting, feedback and opinions and everything, because obviously we're here at the end of the day to make sure that they're the best baseball players that they can be. But I kind of take the other approach too of making sure that they're just the best people that they can be. So one of actually the things that am most proud of that we do and that I do in my role is our GED program that we have. They do an online high school. We also have that going in the DR too, with actually my counterpart in the DR. We work super closely together. But we have that running, and then we give them English classes here as well. So it's really interesting to see it from that perspective, because we might, see baseball players on the TV at the major league level and just think like, wow, like they're such, amazing players. But then I think the work behind the scenes that they've definitely had to do to get there is just crazy.
And I want to spend some time too to think about and talk through what are some of your goals for the future with this role. There's so
Mhm.
many things that you'd want to do and so many resources that are important. But where do
Right.
you see this role going, and what are some of your big goals as you continue to evolve and lead here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, I think there are a million things that I would love to do, and hopefully I get to accomplish. But I think when I started in this role about a year ago, it was a fairly new role. And so I was able to inherit a lot of great things like our GED program and our English classes. But it has also really just allowed me to be creative, like we were talking about earlier, and get the players going with community service and really everything. I think one of the biggest goals that I have is for them to continue to be able to make connections in the community. And I think focusing on the educational aspect, and for sure continuing with the GED, but I would love in the future to maybe be able to do some internships or something for players. I don't know in any of the other baseball teams that we have, if any of them are actively doing that for players, especially here in the US. I know in our academies in the Dominican Republic, they do a lot of trades, and players can get certifications for different things. So I feel like here in the US, especially with all the possibilities that we have, I would love to be able to do some internships for them that they can maybe do during the off season if they're here, or just anywhere in the US, especially for our domestic players. Or our facilities open the whole year, so we have a lot of rehab players here. That unfortunately, that's also just really interesting because they'll go through their rehab, but they also just have a lot of time because they're not on the field. So I think my goal for them is also to help them find something, to help them really work on something, because obviously the dream would be for all of them to get to go to the major league level. But unfortunately in our world, that's not the case. So just helping them be prepared. So I would say my number one goal are internships, and then just continuing to have a good structure for our program.
I love it. I love it. And shifting gears just a little bit, I want to talk about you being a woman in sports because we know it continues to be a very male-dominated arena.
Right.
And that's something that, we've made progress. We're getting better, and everything. But I want to hear from your perspective that you've been in this role. Any challenges that you faced, or what do you see as, as a woman in this role evolving the sports industry? What changes would you like to see when we come to, gender equality in the sport?
Right, for sure. I think, I also, just to preface too, I feel very, fortunate and grateful to work for the team that I work for and to be at this complex. So my boss, Manny, when he hired me, and this was just last year, I was actually one of the only women here at this complex. We had a few female trainers. And we do have a woman who is our Latin American head of player development. So we have that, but actually here physically at the complex, not that many. We had maybe two or three trainers, and then our mental health coach here, but she came 2 days a week, and everybody else, coaches, the rest of the staff, everybody, obviously all our players are male. So that to me was just a really crazy experience because I also have two older sisters and I am just a girl's girl to death. So being surrounded by just men was really interesting. And I honestly I was a little intimidated for sure. And I definitely felt like in my first couple of weeks, I felt like I had to prove myself, that I had to not necessarily be the loudest in the room, but if I had an opinion, I felt like I had to voice it. I was also, a little cautious at the beginning because I was, new to the world of sports. And I think that was a challenge in itself because I noticed right away, obviously, that, and I've known from before that this is a male-dominated sport. And I wasn't sure how to take it or how to handle that. I wasn't sure if, should I, be more extroverted? Should I be louder? Should I, try to get to know everybody by first name and shake their hand every time I see them? And that was really a challenge. I think luckily here with the A's, everyone has been very open and welcoming. I also think that, since that year that I started, we've hired on a lot more women. We have a player analyst who is a woman. She's my next door neighbor. And then we've hired two or three more women in just different roles since I've been here. So that feels really amazing. But I think day to day, stepping out of the office even, or going to networking events, things like that, have been interesting because I think if I, don't introduce myself, there have actually been a few times where people are like, "Oh, you're also here for like this sport or XYZ," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I am," and I'm a coordinator, so that has, I think, at least in the world of sports in general, I think we're slowly paving a path, but there's still so much work to be done. And to for women to just be seen as equals, and not just, oh, you're like a woman. It would be so great to just eventually get to the point where we can just talk about being in sports, but for now we really have to take that, and we are women in sports and we are proud of that, and we want there to be more women in sports. And yeah, I'm excited to hopefully see that change.
I love it. I love it. And for all the young women listening, what advice do you have for them? It could be something that you wish you knew, or just as you've, continued to gain your experience working here. What's something that you'd like to tell them as they pursue a career in sports or any male-dominated industry?
Right, 100%. I think some advice that I would have liked to hear is that to really, really take that leap of faith and to not underestimate yourself or sell yourself short. Because I think, unfortunately, as women, we are used to settling a lot, whether and that's not even in careers. I think sometimes in relationships and everything, and we're like, oh, like this is going to be the best that we're ever going to find. And I don't want to ruffle feathers and I don't want to stir the pot. And I think this is what's best for me. And I think those limiting beliefs are what are going to keep you there. I think words are so powerful. I think affirmations are so powerful. So, to any young woman listening, I think just remind yourself that you are amazing, that you are capable, that you are qualified, and that everything is going to work out for you. I think that has been one of my favorite and best, most used affirmations is everything works out for me. And even on days where I am not sure what I'm going to do or what's going to happen, or my car doesn't turn on in the morning on my way to work, running 15 minutes behind. I just know that everything is going to work out for me, and it does. It does, and that would be my advice to any young woman or just any woman out there. It's going to work out. You just have to believe it.
Oh, I
So,
love that. I love that. This is amazing. My last question for you, and it's probably my
yes.
favorite question.
Uh-huh.
We talk a lot about, unleashing your inner queen, what that means. And I'm curious from your perspective, given all that we know about you and your work,
Right.
what does unleashing your inner queen mean to you? And also, how do you think you unleash your inner queen?
Yeah, so I think, well, what also made me so excited to just come on here and talk to you is I think all the work that you've done is amazing, and the way that you've unleashed your inner queen to the world and shared that with the world, I think is amazing. But I would say for myself too, for me, I kind of think about, how the queen, we know that she can essentially do everything. She has the biggest moves on that board. And so I think that's kind of my mantra too, that I can do everything. Not only does everything work out, but I can do everything. I can really do anything that I set my mind to, and I'm powerful. I think that is probably the biggest one, the power that I hold, that we as women hold as queens, every single one of us as queens, is that power. So I think in my day to day, I unleash that by just reminding myself of how powerful I am, sharing that with other people and looping them into who I am, and helping them realize their potential. So I think it's really interesting because although I work with men most of the day, it's funny because me and some of my younger coworkers too, we find ourselves, we call everybody queens. We're just like, hey queen, or like, how are you doing, queen? And then we've actually found ourselves calling some of our coworkers kings. Like we'll just be like, hey king, like how are you doing? How are you going? So I think in that aspect too, just building people up and helping them realize their potential. But obviously as women banding together because we know how hard it can be to just be a woman in this world. So just uplifting each other every single day, every woman that I see out and about, working on that confidence perspective on my own of if I am out and about and I like somebody's shirt, I'm gonna tell her that I like her shirt and hope that it makes her day, or I like somebody's hair, just anything, because I think we underestimate the power of our compliments and our words, and what we tell people, and maybe what kind of days people are having. So yeah, I would say those are really the biggest things. And again, I love everything that you do, and everything that this podcast stands for. So
Well, thank you so much. I love talking with you, and I know that everyone listening is going to gain so much insight and continue to want to connect with you. And we'll be sure to include, any relevant links in the description. But thank you so much for one, taking the time, and two, sharing all of your amazing insight.
of course, thank you so much, Ashley. I'm so excited to hopefully get to talk again soon. And yeah, I hope everybody has an amazing day.